Today is Monday, June 9th, 2019, and I'm interviewing Daryl, and help me with your last name.
Chavours.
Chavours.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm interviewing Daryl Chavours, and Mr. Chavours is 57 years old, having been born on March 13th of 1962. My name is Sue Burkholder, and I will be the interviewer. And so for the recording, would you please state in what war and branch of service that you served?
I served in the U.S. Army on Operation Desert Storm, Desert Shield.
Okay. All right. So let's start with, if you could tell us when and where you were born.
I was born in Alton, Illinois. It's on the banks of the Mississippi River. It's about 20 miles away from St. Louis, Missouri. I lived there until I joined the military. I went to high school, elementary school, all that.
Okay, and who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My dad, he worked in a hotel. He was a hotel clerk. He kind of did some of everything. He's deceased at this time. My mother, they were separated, so he had custody of us. Basically, my mom, she was like a homemaker, so she didn't really work outside the home.
Okay. And did you have any siblings?
Yes. I'm the youngest. I have, let me get this right so I don't want to come back on me. My oldest sister, she lives in Chicago. Her name is Desma, and my other sister's Michelle, and my brother Dwight, and then comes me. I have a half-sister. Her name is Jessie. She's named after my dad. And then I have two twin sisters that recently found out probably a couple months ago. She lives in California. Her name is Latasha, but unfortunately her twin, she passed away 20 years ago. So that's about it as far as the siblings I have. Just have one brother and four sisters.
Did any of your siblings serve in the military?
Jessie did. My half-sister did. She served in the U.S. Navy.
Okay. So what were you doing before you entered the service? What was your story about how you went in?
I started thinking about the military probably my junior year in high school. I ran track and cross country when I was in high school. I wasn't a great student, but I was okay. And I was kind of looking at my options, what I wanted to do. But I kind of always had this, I don't know, yearning or feeling that I wanted to travel and see the world. So I figured maybe I'll join the military. And I've seen a lot of commercials, you know. And I said, wow, I think I'd like to go there and see this and experience different things. So that kind of spurred me to join. So when I got out of high school, that's when I joined.
And when you went into basic training,
Yes.
can you just tell us a little bit about that, how it was for you, and maybe any memorable moments or drill instructors or any of those type of things?
Okay. I left St. Louis, Missouri. Went to Georgia. We were supposed to have basic training in South Carolina, and my uncle, when he was alive at the time, I used to call him up and ask him various things. Ask him various things about the Army, and when I got there, I remember getting off the plane, and the drill instructors, they were like, they were shouting at me, and everybody, you just kind of run, and you're jittery and stuff like that. And just, just the process of, you going through, you get fitted for your boots and your uniforms and stuff like that. And so uh, it was kind of like, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a shock, going through that just a little bit. Um, Probably once you get down to the routine of getting up early and the, just marching and stuff like that, I think some of the things that I kind of really remember is just basically the marching, and we went through the gas chamber and road marches and stuff like that. And, um, it's quite a bit, you know. I didn't realize, how much you had to know just to be a soldier and do your job and stuff. But it was pretty interesting. I think at one point we got in trouble. There was a couple other guys, we got in trouble. We had to dig a foxhole up to our chest, um, which was kind of interesting. But fortunately, in Georgia, the ground's not really hard, so it was pretty easy to dig. Um, but yeah, it seemed like it was the hardest thing in the world, But looking back, it wasn't so bad after all, going through it. One of the things they used to tell us, the drill instructors, when we'd go in the dining facility, or back then we called it the mess hall, but now it's kind of fast forward to, they said, when you go in the mess hall, eat, don't talk. If you talk, dump your tray. So fortunately, I was one of the very few ones that I never had to dump my tray, because the drill sergeants, they'd walk around at any little chance that they would see that you're trying to talk to your fellow soldier, they'd make you get up and dump your food. So that wasn't a problem for me, but I've seen many of my fellow soldiers have to dump their food. Actually, when I went through basic training, it was co-ed. It was kind of like a experiment. We had the ladies across the way from us, and we were across the way from them. So there was like a platoon of women and two platoons of guys. So, and I believe when we went to the gas chamber, we had to march like 6 miles there and 6 miles back. So we marched there, no problem, and we got out of the gas chamber, and then as we were marching back to the barracks, some of the ladies, the female soldiers, they started dropping out. Well, with everything, if you don't do certain things the right way, there's kind of like, remedial training or punishment behind that. So quite a few of them are in the back digging foxholes as punishment. So it was pretty even. It wasn't no favoritism shown towards, whether you are female soldier or for whatever things you might mess up on. So once I got through that, I went to my advanced training, which is tactical operations, combat signaler. That was about 7 weeks. We had to do various things. Basically, you're learning your job, and then once you go through your schooling, then you get assigned to your unit. So it could be anywhere in the world. They'll ask you, where do you want to go, if you want to stay stateside or if you want to go overseas. Of course, I said I wanted to go overseas, but I didn't know where I was going. So they told me I was going to Germany, which I was, pretty excited about. While I was in basic training, I kind of learned an important lesson as far as being out in the field and sleeping in the field. I didn't really think Georgia got really that cold, but I soon found out. It was like February, March of '81, and I thought, I'll just sleep with my uniform on and I'll be okay. So when I got up that morning, it's like I was cold all day, miserable. So when I got to Germany and I got to my duty station, we had a cold weather class, and they told us specifically, when we're out in the woods, when we're bivouacking, make sure you take your uniform off and stuff it in your sleeping bag, because if you don't, you're going to get up in the morning, you're going to be freezing. So I did that, and I had no problem thereafter. So the rest of the time I was in the military, I never had any more problems. I think it would have been a big problem if I tried to sleep like that, but there were people in my unit that they insisted that, I'm gonna sleep with my uniform on, but yeah, it's a pretty miserable feeling. Um, so I was stationed in a little town called Hanau, West Germany. I was in an artillery unit. We would go out to the field quite often. Probably would stay out about 2 weeks. Our long training exercise would last about 45 days, which seemed like a lifetime. If you had dependents, your wife, your kids and stuff like that, it was pretty rough on them. But if you were single, it wasn't so bad. So when we weren't training, we could take tours and just kind of see the city and go various different places. Probably in my off time, I'd call home sometimes, but I never did come home on leave. I just wanted to see as much as I could while I was there.
Mm-hmm.
So.
What did you do for recreation?
Basically, I'd go out and I'd run, recreation-wise, just sightseeing a lot. I like to run quite a bit. On my off time, when I had time, I'd just go out and run outside the gate, run around the city, and kind of learn my way around the city. That was kind of like my way of learning the different streets and whatnot. The transportation in Germany is really good. Public transportation, the taxis, the buses, the trains, everything's on time. I mean, it's just right there, spot on. I just get on the train and go somewhere. A lot of times I go to Frankfurt and just look around. Frankfurt is fairly close, and whatever cities, on the weekends, if I didn't have duty or if I would guard mount or anything like that. So.
Where was your favorite place that you visited while you were there?
My favorite place? Wow, there's so many of them.
What were your top three,
Wow. You kind of stumped me there just a little bit. I'd say probably Frankfurt is one of the top places. But I like going to the little villages because there wasn't such a high concentration of U.S. personnel or, there. I can't. Yeah, Frankfurt was probably the place because there's a lot of sights and sounds and a lot of stuff to do, and plus there was some American restaurants there like McDonald's and Wendy's and places like that.
How did you deal with the language? Did a lot of the Germans speak English, or did you learn German?
Well, actually, when you're sent to Germany, they have like a little class that they send you through. It's called German Head Start, and you learn the customs. It's for like a week, and different phrases and stuff, how to order your food, to get a taxi, to get on the Bahnhof, which is the train system, how to greet somebody in German. Basically, it's just kind of scratching the surface a little bit, but doesn't really get too advanced, but just kind of get you by, basically. So you're learning the customs and whatnot, so you don't really get too deeply involved in it, but if you want to, there's classes available that you can take. So you have to kind of work it around your work schedule. Plus, I mean, if you know somebody that, the locals, as they say, natives, they would teach you, and then people that were stationed there before, they pick up the language really quick, they can show you and stuff. So there's like a little book that they gave us that we would kind of, read through and learn.
So what was a day like for you while you were there?
If I was working on duty, a typical day would be probably we would wake up between 5:30 and 6. Um, Depending upon the day of the week, we would be dressed to do our physical training, our PT, and that would consist of we would stretch, and I believe this is like my first, my first tour over there. Um, we would do a series of exercises, and then we'd go outside the gate and we'd run. We'd run through the city, but we couldn't really shout and chant and stuff like that because of we had to be conscientious of we're waking people up and stuff. So we would just run, and they'd just hear us running through the neighborhood and stuff. But once we get closer back to the barracks, then we could kind of chant and sing and whatnot. So after that, we would go back in, shower, go eat, then come back out for formation, and then we'd go to our work assignments, wherever you worked at. If you worked administrative or motor pool or communications, which I worked, work on our equipment. So any day would be, it depends what we had to do. Sometimes we would go out in the field, and like I said, we'd stay out in the field for a couple weeks or 45 days. So the time that we didn't have to go out in the field, just whatever needed to be done.
Okay. So you were in or on the edge of a town?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. My first tour in Hanau, we were kind of like on the edge of town, but there was a lot of businesses. It's like a main strip, and you'd walk out the gate, and like to your left and right, there's businesses, and as you got further into town, there's downtown, which is pretty nice. I mean, Christmas is a real nice time. If you were a single soldier, you could, they would kind of like put you on a list to spend time with the German family, Christmas. And I had the opportunity to do that a couple times on both tours. The first time, I think I went with the family. They lived, probably about maybe 20 miles away or something like that. It was pretty good distance. It was a wife and husband, and they had two small girls, and we stayed with them. The tradition is that if they really like you, they kind of celebrate Christmas like a day before, and then if you stay like 2 or 3 days, they really like you, so you go there and you stay and you celebrate Christmas. And actually, in this particular town, they'd never seen an African American for many, many, many years. I think I was the first one, but it was real nice. I went to Mass with the wife, and the husband stayed home with the daughters. And sometimes they'll take two soldiers in their home. So it was really nice. It's a nice town. And normally we try to keep in contact with them, but because I was on short tours, I was gone the next year. So, but yeah, it's nice stuff like that.
How was the food? Did you adjust to that pretty easily? What was it like on base? I assume it was more what we're used to, as opposed to going out into the towns.
The towns, it wasn't It wasn't bad. I think it was pretty good. I mean, some people, I mean, if you don't eat pork, then it's kind of a problem. But they had burgers too as well. Um, like I said, they had McDonald's and Wendy's, and I think there was a Pizza Hut too and KFC as well. So if you were the kind of person that you had to have something from home, that nostalgia, like, oh, I gotta, um, they there's a dish or a meat called schnitzel, it's a pork, and it's got like a gravy and mushrooms. It's like a brown gravy, and they would serve this with, I believe, French fries. Yeah, and French fries are called pommes frites. And a lot of the restaurants, now you may not really care for this, but they'd serve it with mayonnaise, and you probably think, oh, it's not very good, but it is actually. It's pretty good. Their potatoes are kind of a little different from ours. Just I don't know. I think it's probably maybe just the taste or maybe the variety of potatoes that they use. So that was a big thing. Orange juice was called Cappy, and they would serve it. There was really really tall bottles, glass bottles, and sometimes they'd come in plastic jugs. I mean, not jugs, but bottles. But surprisingly, it was really good. As far as adjusting to the food, it wasn't bad. It was pretty good. But that was one of the main dishes that most of the people would probably eat. Sauerkraut, bratwurst, knockwurst. I don't think there was too much that I didn't really care for. Now the potato salad, that was a little different. It was warm, whereas we're used to having it cold. Um, Bacon bits in it. I mean, pieces of bacon, but not really bacon bits. But it was a little different, but it wasn't bad. So um, their wine is good. The beer is good. I did drink a little bit, but the beer was pretty strong. It's a lot stronger than our beers. Has more alcohol content, so um, some people didn't really care for it because they said that it was warm, or um, there was a lot of little stands called Chanel Imbusses. It's kind of like street food over here. It's a little stand, and they have like Kinder beer for little kids. Actually, believe it or not, there's no drinking age, so if you were 18 or 19, you could legally drink outside the base, but once you were on base, you couldn't, go to the PX and purchase beer. But once you got on the economy, it's just wide open, you could drink. So sometimes um, they would mix Coca-Cola in the beer. Some people liked it, some people didn't like it, but it's called cola beer, and quite a few of the Germans they liked it because it's got a little bit of a sweetness to it, but you still got the alcohol taste in it as well. So it was kind of interesting.
So how long were you in Germany?
My first tour, I was in there over there for 18 months. Um, it seems like, excuse me, it seemed like when you first get there, it seems like it's forever, but it's not really, because like the first 30 days, you're like, oh my God, what have I done? Why am I here? Woo, woo. But then I would say after 90 days, then you creep into like 6 months, and then next thing you know, you're like, I really like it here, and then time just starts to go by really fast, and next thing your time's up, and then, you got to pack and do all that stuff, you got to pack your clothes, and if you got a stereo or a vehicle, or it's a headache. It's like packing up a small apartment sometimes, depending upon how much stuff you have or you accumulate. Because, I mean, normally when you go over there, you have very little stuff, but when you come back, it's just like you move into a house and you say, oh, okay, I got this much stuff, but then when you leave, it's like you got 3 times as much. So it's kind of a headache a little bit, but not in a bad way.
So when you left Germany, then where did you go?
Went to Fort Hood, Texas. I was stationed there probably about 2.5 years. It's really hot. um, Winters are really, really mild. Where I was stationed at is in Killeen, Texas. We're kind of like in the central part of Texas. We're really far from Houston and Dallas and like all the major cities, with the exception of Austin, which is the capital of Texas. And it's about an hour's drive south of us, of the base. Killeen is the largest military installation in the world. It is so large. I remember we were on an exercise one time on the base, and we were driving along, and next thing I know, I looked up and I seen that this town actually borders our base, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, there was people coming out of their house, and I was like, this isn't right, because we fire on the range and whatnot, and I couldn't believe it. I was astonished. I said, wow. Um, but there was like a little fence that separated us. I mean, it was um, from the town and stuff, but I mean, people just came out of the house and waving at us and talking to us and whatnot. I was like, that's interesting. I think there was like a couple of towns we passed actually, because the base is so big. I mean, it's just, uh, oh, it's amazing how much room. Um, when you go on exercises, especially in Texas, I mean, there's a lot of snakes and scorpions and fire ants. Those are the things you kind of encounter. So if you're on the ground, it's kind of like beware, especially uh, anybody. Because one thing they would tell us to do is just shake your boots out in the morning, because you don't know if scorpion had crawled in your boot or something. So um, I think one of the things I would do, I had like an old toothbrush, and I would stick it down in my boot and kind of run it around towards the front of the toe of the boot if anything was in there, and then after that I would take my boot and turn it upside down and beat it on the ground to see if anything came out. Fortunately, I never had anything get in my boot, so I was good in that aspect. The bugs, bugs would eat you up pretty good once you go out in the field. Um, Kind of rough terrain. You'd see like longhorn steers out there. You know, like I said, the snakes, they're plentiful. When it got really hot, you wouldn't see too many of them, but when it would cool off, you would see your share of them. Um, I think, yeah, we had a couple of encounters with the snakes out there. Um, Once we were doing like range police, which is basically you're cleaning up trash and stuff, just um, a friend of mine, we were walking and we were talking, and I always had this tendency, I always would look maybe 10, 12 feet ahead of me while I'm talking to him, and I seen something. It looked like it was a stick, probably about maybe half-foot long. And as I got closer and he was talking, he wasn't really paying attention. And I said, if I would have said snake, he would have lunged forward. So instead of me saying snake, I said, watch out. And he stopped dead in his tracks, and the snake just kind of slithered on into the off the road. So, and he said, thanks, you saved me from being bit, because I think if he would have stepped within maybe a couple of inches, he probably would have got bit quite easily. So there was another occasion that we were out in the field and the generators were going, and all of a sudden I heard somebody screaming and hollering. Well, there was a snake coming through our area where we set up, and one of the sergeants, I guess he got a shovel and chased the snake and chopped him up. But the thing about snakes is that you don't pick it up, especially with head, because it can still bite you. But I don't know if he did or not, but they told him not to, so they scooped him up and disposed of him away from our area. So with the fire ants, when we would go to the rifle range, you had to be careful with them because once we got down into our shooting positions, they were pretty active during the day too, and I got it a couple times. So I had my sleeves rolled up, and they just got on me, and it's like a burning sensation. It's just like they sting, and not quite as bad as a wasp or a bee sting, but it's pretty close. But they're pretty mean. So.
So you were in Texas at Fort Hood for about 2.5 years.
Mhm.
You said, okay, then what was your next duty post?
Went back to Germany again. This city, it's Aschaffenburg, which is a little bit closer to Frankfurt, and we used to go to Frankfurt, and then I kind of branched out and went to some other cities. I went to Cologne one time, just kind of exploring, wanting to see different parts of Germany and whatnot, and so I think my German, it wasn't quite what it should be as far as speaking and stuff, but I think I understood a little bit more than what I could speak. Um, it was quite interesting. My roommate, he was stationed in Korea. He was quite an interesting person. It was like every Friday night he was getting into a fight with somebody. Every Friday night, and I don't know how in the world he did this, but he would jump the fence. The MPs would be after him, and he'd come running in the room. He'd slam the door. He said, "Turn the lights off," and turn the lights off. And the MPs were, I don't know how close they were, but I couldn't see how he would jump the fence, but he'd do it. He could do it. I mean, it was amazing. He said, "Yeah, room dog, I jumped the fence, and I had to fight these guys," and I mean, it was just every Friday it seemed like he was fighting somebody. Um, uh, there was one occasion that we had to, I'm trying to think of the city, Munich. We had to go to a concentration camp, which is not far from Munich. That was really an eye-opener. It was real grim. I remember going through where they gassed most of the German Jews, and you could still smell the smell of the gas. And I don't know, it was just really sad, grim, just, you know, um, it's just a smell that you wouldn't really forget, burnt flesh, I mean, it's one thing to burn something on the stove, burn your food, you'd smell that, or a house burn, but just to smell the burnt flesh is just something that just, it's something that, it's kind of like seared in your sensory. Um, hmm. Yeah, it was really bad. The stuff, I mean, the torture and the stuff that they went through. I mean, it was an eye opener just to see something like that. I mean, just the inhumanity that people were treated that way and rounded up, and just discarded like they weren't worth anything, and just everything taken, and they pillaged, and all that. Just, I mean, I don't know. I couldn't really imagine, I mean, actually going through something like that. But it just, for a long time, I thought about that, and even when I seen Schindler's List, and I watched it and I said, wow, how could this, so it really kind of opens your eyes how man can be towards you know, um, just somebody that says that, hey, I want to exterminate this whole race, and it's amazing. Um, we had to go on this trip. I mean, it was mandatory. Um, I think it was kind of an educational thing for us that that we didn't lose sight of the reason why we were there and why we're still there to this day and other places around the world, because it's just uh, it's something that it'll really make you think, and I can imagine probably uh, the World War II vets and World War One vets, what they seen and experienced and whatnot, so it's, I can understand they probably didn't want to talk about it, but yeah, it was really, really something.
So when you were in Germany, did you only work with the American military, or did you ever work with Germans in some way?
Uh, Not too much. I think once we, no, we didn't really have too much interaction. It depends on what your job specialty. We would have some exercises together, but not too much. I remember we went to their dining facility. I mean, their barracks. It was quite some distance away. I can't remember the name of the town, but we dressed up and we had dinner with them, and they're they're pretty good soldiers. I give them that. They're real astute. They're good. Um, um, but as far as this, really, I'd probably say other units, maybe Air Force. Depending upon, like I said, your job, you might work with them, but in my case, we didn't really have too much interaction with them. Just that one occasion that I remember that we went to their military barracks. Um, Everything spotless. I mean, I was impressed.
So how long were you in Germany the second time then?
Actually, had another short tour.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Actually, it went faster than the first one. I didn't have that kind of like, oh, I got to go home, feeling when I got there, because I knew what to expect, and I knew, the interactions and whatnot, you know, um, with the local population and stuff like that. So there wasn't that kind of like, oh, I want to go home because, this is not, it's not like home. But you have to remember, you're in a foreign country, you're not home, so you can't do some of the things you do at home in their country. So you have to. It's kind of like if I was to visit you in your home, I couldn't do what I do at my house in your house. So you have to kind of look at that context. So you have to kind of respect, what they do. So I think as long as you do that, you're fine. You don't try to, force what you do in your home in somebody else's home. But as long as the respect is there and you follow the rules and stuff, then everything will work out okay. So,
So, so you left Germany again, and where did you go from there?
actually, I got out. I was kind of getting maybe a little bit tired of just because I don't know for the other branches of service, but I know with the Army, you don't stay in one place too long. The longest you might stay is maybe 36 months, which is 3 years, or um, if you're on an accompanied tour, it's usually like 4 years. Unaccompanied, it could be anywhere from 18 to 36 months. So in my case, it was 18 months since I was on an accompanied. And the reason why, if you're on an accompanied tour, is that there's a lot of cost and expense to bring your family over, this and this and this, and then so it's much easier to move somebody that's single and you don't have dependents, and it's a lot of paperwork, and so you're basically packing up an entire household. You gotta, you know, if you have a family pet or something like that, you gotta, you know, customs and all that, vaccinations and stuff, and that's another thing. You get a lot of shots, you know. I wasn't a big fan of getting shots, but it was just something that you have to do. You can't say, well, no, I don't think so, I'm going to do that, but it doesn't work that way, so you have to do what they tell you to do. So, um, going to Saudi Arabia, oh my God, we got a lot of shots. We got shots. We went to Fort Ben Harrison, Indiana. Um, we zeroed our rifles. We trained in the gas chamber. Everything you could think of, we did. Got everything ready. And
So, excuse me just a second. So you signed, you got out,
mhm,
and then you got back in the Army or
Army Reserve.
Army Reserve? Okay,
Right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Oops, I kind of got a little ahead of myself, so I can
It's
kind
okay.
of backtrack a little bit.
It's okay.
I think I stayed out for about maybe a year or two, and I said, you know, I want to do something. So I said, well, maybe I'll join the reserves. So I joined the reserves, and so the local reserve unit here, I joined them. So I was with them as, well, they call us weekend warriors, National Guard slash Army Reserve. So you go once a month, 2 weeks for annual training, wherever they might send you to. In our case, we go to Wisconsin, and I think probably like my third or fourth year in the reserves, that's when things started to kind of get hot in the Middle East. You know, the Saddam, and the whole shot. He invaded Kuwait, and oh man, and so, you know, I'm watching the news just like everybody else is, and some of my family members are calling, and they're saying, do you think you're going to go? And I was like, well, maybe, maybe not, I don't know. So things started heating up. Active duty units were going over there, well-known units, the 1st Cav Division, 82nd Airborne, on and on and on, and different stateside units, they were going over there. 101st Airborne. So, and then reserve units are being called up to support, and so it was just a matter of time until I guess they started calling up units, more and more units, and then some National Guard units, more Army Reserve units than National Guard, and so when you go to war, you have to be kind of, I don't know, be able to do your job or qualified and stuff like that. And you know, physical fitness is a must. You know, because you know you're carrying, you know, a rucksack or whatever. You know, you're carrying your rifle, and you know, you got a helmet on your head, you got a flak vest, and all this stuff. You know, so you have to be physically fit, pretty much. You know, to the rigors and stuff, because I mean the days are, you know, can be pretty long and stuff like that. So they got a call at my unit, and I was at work, and I was working. Oh shoot, I'm trying to remember. Actually, I was working at school for children with DD, developmental delays, and I got a call. And my commander was on the phone, and he says, well, you need to report to the unit. And I was like, oh boy, this is it. He says, well, you need to report to the unit as soon as possible. So I went back to the classroom, and I told the teacher, and I said, listen, I got to go to my unit, and I got to go right now. So I clocked out, I left, I jumped in my car, and I'm driving there. It wasn't a far drive, and so I get to my unit, and they said, here's your orders. You got to be back here such and such day. I think it was like a Wednesday I got the call. I think I had to be back there like that Saturday, so it was like scramble for the next 2-3 days. So I had to talk to my landlord, cable company, phone company, back then we didn't have cell phones and all this stuff, so everything was landline, and so, and then went through all that and talked to my cousin, and then I had to call relatives, call my sisters, call my brother, call my dad, and just on and on and on, and then friends and coworkers, but it was just kind of a roller coaster of, then people were crying, and I said, look, I don't know, and so I'll give you my address, give me your address, and I'll write to you and stuff like this. So for the next 3 days, it was just like in and out, just running here, doing this, doing that, and okay, do I have this? Do I have that? So got through all that, and then I told my cousin, hey, you're gonna have to take my car and leave it at your house, and so he dropped me off to a reserve center, and I had my uniform, I had everything, and so basically, as far as civilian clothes, I didn't really have too much. They encourage you not to take too much, but I had mostly my uniforms and like maybe sweatshirts and sweatpants, a few outfits like that, and running shoes, and so there wasn't a whole lot of room, like I said, for just to kind of get dressed up, but they allowed you to take a few outfits, so after that was it. It was just, we stayed at the reserve center, we slept on the cots and whatnot, and so we started going through the process of getting ready to get closer and closer to our main objective, which was being in Saudi Arabia. So that took probably, I'd say, about a good month, maybe month and a half, pretty close. So you go through a lot of paperwork, you write your will out. It's kind of a sobering thought, because you're like, well, I'm going over here, I may not come back the way I went over there, so, but it goes with the territory, and it's something that you signed up for, so you can't really say, well, I don't want to go. So, but that's just the way it is, So, so you're going through this, and all kinds of thoughts are racing through your mind. I try not to really dwell on what my family was thinking and stuff like that. I just tried to pay attention to what was in front of me and what I had to do to get through the process as far as getting to Saudi Arabia, and not really worry about anything that was going on. Because if you had a girlfriend, wife, kids, that I can understand. But at the time, the person I was seeing, we were kind of like on the outs, and then all of a sudden, I get this phone call. Did you get called up? Yes, so I couldn't really go into detail and talk to her too much about, what was I doing, or, where was I going to be at. And I said, well, just give me your address and I'll write to you when I get a chance, which didn't happen until once we got over there. So, but it's a long process. I mean, everything has got to be ready. Once we left here in Springfield, I went to Danville, and I was attached to a unit. So actually what happens is that they needed certain people to fill certain vacancies that they needed to, that they required for this battalion that I was transferred to. So I left my unit here, and they transferred me to a unit in Danville. So I had to fill a slot there. It was like, I think it was like probably 4 or 5 of us, my unit here in Springfield. And we had to fill the slots that the people weren't able to do their job, or they got out, or it was just empty, basically. So we had to fill those slots. So we did a little bit more training there. So we left Danville. We took a bus ride to Indiana, and there we did more training. So we stayed there for about a good month or so, and formation, stuff like that, training, and your weapons, and going over your paperwork again, who's going to be your beneficiary, stuff like this, And I know it's, some people are kind of having a hard time thinking that, hey, this is it for me, you know, but, it's just what we signed up for. And so we got through our training there, and that's where we got our shots. Oh, I've never had so many shots at one time, because there was one day, and I know we were getting close when they tell you it's time to get your shots. That's when it's close to time for you to get on a plane and ship out. So this one particular day, it was pretty nice, sunny, and they said, well, okay, you gotta go to the clinic, and they lined us all up, and one by one, they had probably about 4 or 5 medics, and they take 4 or 5 of us at a time and poke, 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 poke. And the worst shot that I would say we got, it was kind of like a booster shot, but oh, that was painful. I got through that, and so I think we shipped out the following Thursday or Friday. Another bus ride, went to, Wright-Patterson, Ohio. We stayed there. Somehow I got really, not really sick, but I had a nosebleed, and I don't have them often, but sometimes it just like, I guess everything was kind of right for it because it was so hot in the building, and we were waiting for our flight, and it got really so hot, and I guess I got maybe a little bit too warm or something, I don't know, but I had like a little bit of a cold, and my ears are stopped up and everything, so I guess everything was kind of in the makings for me to have a nosebleed. But anyway, I remember waking up, and I got up and I walked past my commander, and she seen, it was this blood just coming out of my nose and all over my face, and she asked me, she said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I just need to go outside and kind of cool off a little bit." And so my ears are still stopped up, and we flew from Wright-Patterson to, I think there's an Air Force base in Massachusetts, and I seen an Air Force doctor, and he gave me some pills, and because my ears are still really plugged up, so when you're flying and if you have any kind of, it's painful. So I'm so thankful that I got the pills, and the pressure it subsided and everything, and didn't have any more nosebleeds. But it's rare for me to have them, but that occasion it was pretty bad. So we stayed there. The food wasn't bad at the Air Force Base at both of them, at Wright-Patterson. It was like an overnight stay, so the next morning we boarded our plane. And then from Massachusetts, that's when we took off, going across the water. So total time for our flight was like 23 hours, which was 1 hour shy of a day, basically. And you're going through like maybe, I think, 4 or 5 different time zones just to get there. Because I knew it was 8 hours to get to Germany because of my previous experience. From going to Germany so many times. So the plane that we were on, it was a C-5 Galaxy, which is a very, very, very large plane, which is probably one of the largest planes in the world, cargo-wise. From where we're sitting, we had to climb up a flight of stairs, basically, and you could look down and see your vehicles in the belly of the plane, and it was probably about 1 or 2 stories high, easily. So I think if you fell from that distance, you were going to break something or maybe not survive the fall, 1 to 2. And so they closed it up, and so we were sitting up in the top where the pilots were at. So, and one thing I remember during the flight, they would feed us, they would constantly feed us. Well, the reason behind that was jet lag. And other times when I've flown, you have jet lag and you're like, oh, I'm so tired. Oh, no. Once we got there, didn't have no jet lag. So I guess that was the key to it. Our first stop, we stopped in Spain at Air Force Base. It was at night. At the time, Colin Powell, he was the um, Joint Chiefs Chairman. Bush was in office, Elder Bush, Herbert, Dick Cheney. Um, so I remember, watching TV and the president was on and he said, Saddam, you better not do this. We're going to do this to you, blah, blah, blah. And everybody was cheering and going nuts and everything. And so I watched a little bit of that. I remember I went and got something to eat and kind of went outside and walked around, just kind of looked. I was like, wow, I'm in Spain, Didn't really get to go anywhere. So our movements were kind of confined, because we had to stay close. And then very next morning, we got up, back on the plane again, flying. So that took us into Saudi Arabia. We finally landed there. It was nighttime. And there was a guy, it was a paratrooper from the 82nd Airborne. And he came on the plane. He says, welcome to Saudi Arabia. I was like, oh my God, we're here. So the nose cone of the plane, it tilted up like this, and I didn't know that at the time. And I thought, oh wow, this is interesting. So we came down the stairs that we climbed up to get into our seats, and I remember getting on this bus. The bus was very uncomfortable. I mean, the seats were like just really, really smaller than our school buses. I was like, oh my God, you have your pack on, your weapon, and all your gear and stuff, and you're like, man, I can barely fit in this seat. And it was a real bumpy ride. So finally we got to our destination. So we got to a warehouse and we got everything unloaded. Had our duffel bags, all our gear and stuff like that. So we stayed there, stayed in the warehouse probably for about, I'd say about a week and a half. We weren't actually out in the desert, but we were like in the city. And Saudi Arabia, it's real big and vast, but it's not, towns are really far apart, and houses not really aesthetically as far as really being, they're just kind of bland, drab, but the Saudis that have money, I mean, their houses are really nice, tall, I mean, big walls. I mean, you can't see over them, really nice. That's basically what I was able to see as far as seeing, actual Saudi's house or anything like that. I never did make it into a compound like that, So once we got to the warehouse, I remember seeing there was like a gas station. I can't think of it, Kerr-McGee. I was like, that's in the States, I said, it's interesting, So the warehouse we were in, it was kind of rickety and windy, and it was kind of a little cold. But of course, we had our sleeping bags and we were on cots and stuff, and there was no fear of scorpions or fire ants or anything like that. So we were kind of way back in the rear. We were getting our stuff ready, waiting orders to move out to go to our battle position where we were going to be at in the desert. So we were checking our gear and stuff like that, and we had guard mount, and we'd walk around. And one of the things they told us not to do, and this happened later on after the war was over with, I'll tell you about that. They said don't drink the water. Their infrastructure as far as their water, it's not really good. It's not like it is here in the States, or like when I was in Germany, you could, safely drink the water and, use it. Well, I don't know what's the problem with their infrastructure as far as their water goes, but it's really bad. So we had to drink bottled water all the time. So if you had ice cubes, you had to beware not to get ice in your drink, because the water's not really treated as well, like, because you would think, with the money that they have, it would be a little bit more modern, and things would be more up to par and up to grade. But it's not. It's kind of like you have a royal family, and it's like the haves and the have-nots. So you have 3,000 members of the royal family, and then you have the rest of the population. So you would think that things would be better, but that's just the way it is. So we finally moved out, and we had like advance party, went to our battle position up on the border. So we had so many people leave first, and then there was like a second wave of people. So I didn't go the first round, but the second round I did, and then the main body would come up, and then we'd establish our position and whatnot. And I was in a fuel unit basically, so we supplied fuel for the M1 tanks, for the helicopters, the trucks, anything that needed fuel. So I was in the second wave, and I was like, oh boy, I'm going up to the border now. So that's when, got kind of a little scared and a little rickety and, jumpy and everything. And so at this point, the war wasn't really on officially as far as the fighting goes. We were just getting in position basically. And so a couple days, probably about 3 or 4 days later, the main body came up, and then we got established, and we're in our tents and what have you. And I think once everybody got up there in the unit and everything, and we got set up and everything, I can recall, I think probably the first or second day, everybody was there. One of the guys in the unit, he said he heard somebody, he heard a dog barking. So Saudi Arabia, the towns are really, really far apart, and where we were at, there was nothing to be seen, nothing but desert, as far as the eye could see. And the nearest town was probably about maybe 5 or 10 miles up the road. And he said he heard this dog barking. He said he heard a guy say something in Arabic. And he talked about somebody that was just like, just like fear, just like gripped us. It was like, oh my God, And he said he seen a cigarette, and he seen the guy kind of puff on the cigarette or something, and didn't see him no more. So he came back and he told everybody, and everybody was like, is this it? So, but it was just a Bedouin. Later on, we'd find out, because they just wandered the desert basically. They're just nomads of the desert. They go just all around. So we got closer and closer and closer, and we got established in, just the daily routine. We set up communications between our tents and, our higher command. And we had a unit from Mississippi. We had a unit from, I think, Virginia. And my job was to establish communication between our units and stuff. So I had to run the field wire and whatnot, and so we could talk. So we didn't have to run over to this tent, run over that tent. So got that all established, and as time went on, we got closer and closer. And I remember Bush saying, you better back down, you better do this, you better do that. And it's like, nah, he's not hearing it. He's gonna keep on doing what he's doing. So we're sitting around, we're just huddling around the radio. And the night that they told us that we were gonna bomb and start invading them, I mean, it's just like, it was unreal. I mean, people were crying, and just, I remember they called us in the tent, and we put our chemical gear on and stuff, and our chaplain, he talked to us. And I think prior to that, General Schwarzkopf, he's deceased now, but I remember him talking, and we're listening to him on the radio, and he says, if there's somebody that's not very proficient, or if they need help, help them out. This is a group effort. Just help whenever you can. And he talked for probably about maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and we listened to it. And then our chaplain, he talked to us. And then some of the people in the unit, they were really gun-ho. They were like, oh yeah, I want to do this. I want to kill somebody, you know. And I was like, yeah, okay. So so after the talk, and the chaplain, he said what he had to say, and he said, you know, we're going to pray, and we're going to do this and that, and blah, blah, blah. And like I said, some people were breaking down, you know. I understand, you know, there's pressure, you know. I mean, we're actually here, and we're actually going to, you know, start bombing him, and, you know, we're going to do it, and this is it. It's a point of no return, you know. So at that time, I didn't really I felt pretty calm. I wasn't scared or anything. I had a fleeting thought. I just kind of thought about, well, I wonder what my family's thinking about this back home, and that was about it. That was about the extent that I thought, and I just went forward from there. So the air campaign, it was going on for some time, but then we were going into the ground phase of it, and that was the big thing. And when it started, I'll never forget this, because I couldn't believe it. There was a little village that was probably as far as the eye could see, and I know they had electricity. The night that we engaged them on the ground phase of the war, everything went black. And I mean, absolutely everything went black. It was just like the power went out everywhere. You couldn't see, I could put my hand up in front of my face. I couldn't even see my hand. It was so dark, because I remember just standing outside the tent, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, even the little village over there, I said, oh no. So when it kicked off, it really kicked off. And I mean, so they invaded. I mean, they went forward. They thought we were coming in one direction, but actually we flanked them and came a different direction. And it was just like, they just gave up. It's just like, we're sorry, you know, we quit, you know. So we were anticipating the Republican Guard, but no, they just rolled through there. And a lot of guys are like, yeah, let's go to Baghdad. But, you know, Bush said, no, we're not going to go to Baghdad. We're going to do what we say we're going to do, and then that's it. We're going to stop. And, you know, I mean, they were just giving up like you wouldn't believe. I mean, they just ran roughshod off them. Just, so the next morning, because I worked at night. I worked from, I think, like 9 or 8 o'clock at night till like 8 in the morning, something like that. So when I seen that total blackness, I was like, wow. I couldn't see anything. I was just like, wow. And power didn't come back up or anything. So it was just like, you know, you have a flashlight, you're just kind of moving around, and, you know, and all we seen, it was helicopters, Chinooks, just whizzing by. And we had to keep them fueled and everything, so it was quite something. They were giving up in droves. I mean, they were just running through them, just pushing it. It took 100 hours, but by that Friday, they just like, oh, I think we've had enough, and so they surrendered, and then the war was over with, and, you know, everybody was like, yes, you know, but we had our share of casualties from the war. The thing is about war is that people get hurt, not so much from, you know, enemy fire or anything like that. I mean, accidents. You step on a landmine, you get off the road. Where we were at, it was heavily mined, not close to us, but up the road from us. They laid a lot of landmines, and there was one young guy, he was 18 years old, from California. I don't know, he was a good athlete from what I understand. I read in the Stars and Stripes, but they were talking about it, and they said he he got off the hardball, or the road as we call it, and he started running. There was something that he seen out in the field, and all of a sudden it's just like boom, hit a landmine. It blew him up in the air, and they medevaced him, so didn't make it. So stuff like that happens. Accidents happen. So, but as far as my unit, nobody really suffered any. I mean, we didn't suffer any casualties, but I mean, if you were in a line unit, say infantry or artillery or a tanker or something like that, then yeah. Altogether, it was like 142 people that died, in this war. So it was pretty low. But I think, even one person dying, that's still too much. But we have no control over that, and that's just what war is. You're going to suffer losses as well as your foe on the opposing side. But it's just, that's the way it is. I mean, you try to make them quit before you do, or so. And war is not. It's not. Should I say, it's not glamorous, and there's nothing really romantic about it. It's an emotional roller coaster, because it affects different people in different ways. Some people, it really affects them. Some people, they kind of suppress it and just hold everything in and whatnot. My personal experience, I've had a few nightmares when I did come back from the Gulf, and it almost seemed like it was like I was just still there. It was just like I was just right there, and I'm just walking around and I'm talking, and it was just so real. I couldn't. I think when I woke up, I was just like, oh boy. But I think when you experience something like that, it's something that's not gonna. You won't forget it, no time soon, ever in your lifetime. Saddam, they tortured some people. We've seen some things that they did do to the people that they. Well, I'm not going to really say captured or anything like that, but just when they invaded Kuwait, they did some things to them. We've seen some torture devices on video. Just kind of like household tools that they would use. For example, there was a box spring, without the cover on it or anything like that. Somehow they kind of rigged it up to plug it into a socket or something, and they would stand somebody, or probably, I guess, oh shit, I'm looking for the word, either tape or tie their hands or bound their hands to this box spring and just, plug the plug into the socket, and it just shocked the daylights out of them, and there was like there was a tool that you use to kind of shave like your door if you're fitting a new door into your house. Can't think of the name of the tool, but it's not a leveler, but it shaves it down. That was one of the torture things that they would use. There was a file that, like a rat tail file that I seen. Yeah, he did some pretty bad stuff. We didn't actually see the people that were tortured, but this is the stuff that when we overran them and got and freed some of the people that were being tortured and stuff, this is the stuff that they recorded and they showed it to us, and I was like, wow. So it kind of brought me back to when I was stationed in Germany on my second tour, and I went to the concentration camp, the museum in Baden-Baden, or actually close to Munich, that what was done in World War II almost, probably 75 years ago, the stuff that man will do against, but yeah, that was, it's pretty bad. So we stayed up there on the border, and so when the war was over with, we had to get everything packed up, and the sand in Saudi Arabia is really, it's like almost like a powder almost, but it's real fine, and it gets everywhere. I mean, your clothes, your hair, your gear, your weapons. I mean, it just, helicopter comes in, the dust is whipping up, and it's bad. Your food sometimes. Experienced a couple sandstorms, probably, yeah, about 3 or 4 of them. Once, probably maybe a couple up on the border while we were fighting. It wasn't too bad. It didn't last very long. Probably maybe just dust up for maybe a couple days, but it's nothing to stop it. It's just comes out of nowhere, and it just blows everywhere. And we had like a little volleyball game while we were up on the border. They had like a cookout. Our officers tried to cook us food on the grill, but unfortunately, the food wasn't done. It was chicken, and I'm not saying I'm a master barbecuer or chef on the grill, but I could tell, when you cook chicken on the grill, it's gotta have a certain amount of heat, and when it gets done, it gets smaller than its original size when you put it on the grill. So I kind of passed on that. I stayed safe, and I had a burger, and because pork is not something that they have readily available in Saudi Arabia, there's no hot dogs. Or I think we were able to get some hot dogs, so I had that. I don't know, our mess sergeant, he was able to get them. I guess they flew them in or something like that. So I just had a hamburger and hot dog. I knew those 2 things were safe. Now the chicken, that was a whole different story. So I just kind of like, no, I think I'll leave it alone. So I didn't get sick from that in that regard. We had like MREs. They were like in a package. They were brown. I don't know if you've heard of them, but you just tear them open, and you can add water to like the dehydrated fruit and stuff like that. So that's what we'd have like for lunch. Breakfast is usually kind of like K rations. It was like an oversized TV dinner basically. You'd warm them up, and the eggs, they were okay. I mean, if they put them into these like kind of like hot box containers that they call mermites, the eggs would turn green because they interact with the lining in the container. So it turned green, and then, well, the smell would come too. So that wasn't too appetizing, but much to my surprise, some people would still eat the eggs. I mean, they kind of had that kind of rot gut, ironclad stomach. So I would kind of pass at times. So go for the fruit and maybe a little bit of meat or something like that. But I don't know, it wasn't too appetizing. So, but dinner, we would have something hot. It would be a little bit better than our breakfast, but it wasn't so bad. So before we actually had it, went through, I mean, the actual fighting and everything, there was a town probably about 10 miles up the road. It's called Rafah. And we'd go in there and shop a little bit and eat. They'd have these kebabs and whatnot. And sometimes some of the guys in the unit, they were really paranoid. They were like, oh no, they're not going to poison me, because when we were back at the warehouse, they were like, oh no, I'm not going to eat that food. I'm going to eat MREs. You're not going to kill me, So paranoia kind of runs really rampant when you're in a foreign country, and especially when you go into war. So people would think about stuff that, hey, they might do something to me, so I'm not going to eat this. So like I said, they just like even when we got up on the border and we were able to go into this little small town or village or what have you to eat, no, they weren't trusting. They just didn't trust anything. So, I said, hey, what's the worst? So, um, it was pretty nice. I remember one occasion we were up there. It was in the evening, and the Saudis, they pray 5 times a day. I mean, Islam, should I say. I'm not, should I say, real well versed, but I do know that they pray several times a day. And then Ramadan, we happened to be up there during that time. Right before that, we went up, and it was probably late in the evening, probably about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening. And we were walking around from shop to shop and looking around and whatnot, and got around about 7:30. All of a sudden, we hear this loudspeaker. Somebody's going up and down the street saying something in Arabic, and all of a sudden, the shop doors, they close. Clank, 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 they're closing up. So this particular time, we happened to be in this little, like, restaurant slash cafe, what have you. So we're waiting for our food. And I went outside and I looked, and I see the Saudi cleric, and there's a Saudi soldier driving him. And when he comes around and he says whatever he's saying in Arabic, you better close up shop, because if not, you're going to be arrested. There's going to be a big fine and possibly go to jail. So all of a sudden, everybody's closing up, and we're inside, and they stopped what they were doing. They locked the door, and we had to sit there and wait. And it wasn't a long wait. It was about maybe 15, 20 minutes. They went back and they prayed, come out. So they resumed cooking, and we had our meal. And so, yeah, that's quite interesting. They're very strict about you can't really interact with the Saudi women. You can't really steer. You can't really talk to them. So they have to be in the company of a male person in their family. Sometimes you might see about this much of their eyes, and sometimes their entire faces just covered with the veil, and you'll just see like the outline of the nose, and that's it. I mean, you probably see through it. Sometimes you can't even see through it. It's so dark. But most instances, you'll probably see about this much of their eyes, and everything else is covered. For the female soldiers, they're fine in uniform, but if they weren't in uniform, they'd had to cover up too. But for the most part, we would still be in our uniform when we would go visit the village and stuff to eat and buy souvenirs and whatnot, We couldn't really take our weapons in there, but we had them nearby, just in case. So it's kind of like one of those don't leave home without something, So there's another occasion. I think we probably went there I think I went to town maybe 4 or 5 times in the time I was up on the border. I remember I called back home. I called my aunt, and she asked me, she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Yeah, I'm eating this goat burger," which really I was, and she kind of laughed, I said, "Yeah," I said, there's no pork here, so, this is what they have, and, you just have to run with it, And so I told her, I said, I'm having a goat burger and fries, and she kind of fell out laughing. She thought it was funny, and I said, yeah, that's one of the main meats that they have, is chicken or beef or goat meat. So no pork, of course. So chicken is a big staple that they do have quite a bit of, that they eat quite a bit. There was another restaurant I visited. It was, I remember you had this hearth type oven, you shove the kebabs in, and it was really good, I was like, wow, this is really good. But Yeah, it was a really small town. Um, Not too much to really um, to do there. I mean, as far as sightseeing or anything like that. But other than that, it was good just to get souvenirs and get away from the base and stuff, and kind of a little change of scenery. And you'd see people walking up and down the streets. They got the headscarves on and the long robes. And the reason behind that, they said that they stay pretty cool because of the white. It doesn't attract; it deflects the heat and stuff. And um, a lot of the men, they would wear like sandals. Very rarely you would see somebody wearing closed-toed shoes. Everything was kind of like open-toed, and I was like, no, I couldn't do that too much. But I mean, they would, yeah, they would. That was their fashion. Um, so once we got off the border, it was kind of like in stages. Um, I was kind of like one of the last personnel with other people up on the border. We had to kind of like close up shop. So everybody left in the main body. And you could tell if there was a camel nearby because the flies were terrible, awful. The flies here in the continental United States, they're fast. Over there, they're slow, but they bite like you wouldn't believe. I mean, they bite hard. I mean, really hard. And while everybody was up on the border, we might see a camel or two, but all of a sudden you'd see one fly, two flies, three flies, and then it was like just a swarm of them that would come into camp, and it just like you were swatting left and right. I mean, flies are just biting like crazy. And once that camel got away, would go on about its way wherever they were going with the Bedouins, because there could be like three or four camels, and they're just kind of herding them, going to wherever they're going. Then the flies would subside, and everything would be good. But man, right before we got ready to leave, I could see like two or three camels off in the distance, and like I said, the flies would just come and come and come, and just like it's just a swarm. And there's not really too much you can do. I mean, you're just swatting left and right. Um, Another thing, sand fleas. I never did get bit by any sand fleas, but there's a lot of people that did encounter it. They get bit around their ankles and whatnot, but I never did get bit. I guess I was fortunate or something. I don't know, but a lot of people said that they had problems with it. So what would happen was that we had a lot of school children, relatives, church groups, and whatnot. They would send us like flea collars for your dog. Believe it or not, and you'd put them around your ankles to keep the fleas from biting you, because you couldn't ship that through the U.S. mail because postal regulation. So that was easier to ship because the canisters being pressurized and whatnot. So that was a long trip for it. So um, leave it to GIs. We can think of stuff. We can improvise. We'll do this, do that. Oh yeah, we can. Yeah, yeah, we can improvise. We're really good at doing that. So that's what a lot of guys would do. They would put those around their ankles and stuff because yeah, it'd get chewed up kind of bad. But I was fortunate. I didn't encounter that. The only thing I had to worry about was just the flies. And that was about it. Um, didn't really tell you about the weather. Now, a lot of people have this misconception that it's in the wintertime, it's really, really warm in the desert. That's not true. It does get cold in the desert, and believe it or not, when we got there, it was like, January. Yeah, January. So January, February. So we started coming out of the desert probably towards the end of April, going into May, somewhere around there. Well, January, February, March, it gets really cold. I mean, the days are like almost like fall days here in the States. You know, you got the nice, warm, sunny days. You're like, open up the windows and just, hey, no problem, you know. But come night, oh boy, you feel like you're gonna freeze. I mean, literally, because, and this is one thing I learned that I come to appreciate trees and buildings and stuff, is that when you have that, it slows down the wind speed quite a bit, and you kind of retain the temperature. But when you're out in the open and there's nothing to slow down the wind, when it comes through, it's cold. I mean, you feel like you're going to freeze to death, because I mean, it's just, there's nothing. I mean, it's just when it blows, and I mean, it's unmerciful. It just, it's like, oh my God, I'm freezing. But fortunately, with the military, you pack and you have enough for whatever situation may arise, whether it's raining or it's extremely cold or it's extremely hot. You got it, and pretty much so what you need is packed in your duffel bag, whatever branch you're in. You have whatever you need. But there was some soldier that we seen, I think he was up on the border. He was in another unit, and I was talking to him, and I asked him, I said, do you have your field jacket? He was like, oh, no, I don't need my field jacket. And I was like, have you lost your mind? He was like, oh, no, it's going to be warm. And I said, no. I said, tonight it's going to get cold. And I think he about froze. And this is like in January, and it gets really, really cold. But when it gets closer, like to spring, it starts to warm up and it gets hot. And, like our hottest days here in the state, with the exception of like Death Valley, California, where it's like 100 and some odd degrees year round all the time. Well, it starts getting warm like towards the end of April going into May. We're talking, it's like 85, 90 at night. And during the day, it's like 105, 110, 115 during the day. So you're not wanting to move around or do too much during the day. And it gets really, really, really hot. I mean, because stuff just kind of like, your equipment, it takes a beating because of the extreme heat. I remember our radios, it's sitting underneath the tent, but it's like I stuck my hand on a hot stove. It was so hot. And the sun the rays wasn't even hitting. It was just the heat. I mean, it's just so hot. I was like, wow, that's really hot. Once we got to the point where it started getting really, really warm, even in the wintertime, you still have to drink a lot of water. There's no substitute. We had something called like near beer. Once we get off the border and stuff, it's non-alcoholic. And some guys that, I'm not gonna say they had a drinking problem, but they like to drink excessively. That was kind of like, it got them over the hump, so to speak. Once we came off the border, we went back to the warehouse, and they were doing like these tours. There was a little island out in the Arabian Sea. It's called Bahrain, a little bitty island. Just to give you an idea how small it is, it's only like 28 miles around, and there's a long bridge. It's like, I can't think of it's a long expansion bridge, and all you see to your left and right is nothing but the ocean. So stay on the road. Don't have no accident on this bridge, because it's pretty well shark infested too. So, but it's a naval installation that's there, and that's the only place where you can drink. You can legally drink. That's where a lot of the Saudi princes and princes go to drink and have a time, and they're with the ladies of the evening, so to speak. stuff like that goes on there. It's allowed. So, but once you come back into Saudi Arabia, there's no alcohol, there's no pornography, there's none of this, there's none of that. You can't. No. So the things that we enjoy here, no, can't do it. So I spent the day there. It was pretty interesting. It was nice. A lot of things to see. The gold was fairly cheap. The food was really good too. Didn't see too many Navy personnel. They were mostly in civilian clothes. I think, if I recall right, I think we had our civilian clothes on too, as a matter of fact. But yeah, and they had this. You could go on the ship, but somehow I got sick. Once we got off the border, I was brushing my teeth, and they had running water and stuff, but like I said earlier, they cautioned us from using the water out of the tap because it's not really treated well. Well, with my luck, I forgot, and it was probably about maybe 2 ounces of water, and I put my toothbrush underneath it, and I started brushing my teeth, and all these guys, they started looking at me, and they looked at me, and I was like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. Yeah. So after I finished brushing my teeth, I would say probably about 20 minutes later, my stomach started rolling, bubble guts, everything you can call it. I mean, it was like 18 trips to the bathroom, back and forth, down the hall, down the hall, down the hall. And I couldn't work for like a day and a half. I think they gave me, I can't remember the type of pills it was. It was, I don't know, some pills, and I remember it's like Pepto-Bismol, but I was so sick that I couldn't even stand up and walk around. I just had to lay there. And I laid there, I just looked at the ceiling. I was like, oh boy, couldn't eat a thing, couldn't drink any water, couldn't do anything. I just lay there and just look. When I got the medicine and stuff, I mean, it stopped all that, and it's like, oh, I'm so glad. And so the second day, they cleared me. I could go back to work. So at that time, we were cleaning our equipment and stuff. So I missed out on going on the ship that was in Bahrain. So I missed out on that because I was sick. So, and they were taking like, pictures and stuff, and when you're coming off the ship, you'd pose and take a picture, and, so. But that was okay. I mean, I guess that's the price you pay. I mean, stuff happens, so not everything goes according to plan. So, but after that, I didn't do that again. So I made sure I brushed my teeth with bottled water. So that was an experience. So we finally got, we had to clean our gear and stuff, and that was long days. It took maybe about 2.5 weeks. We were at their military installation. It's called King Khalid Military Installation, and they had these big old wash racks, and we had hoses. We had to clean all our equipment. We had to spray our tents down and get all the dust and sand off of them. Our vehicles, we had to, long days for 2 weeks. Everything had to be cleaned. And unfortunately, people before us that first got over there, like the 82nd Airborne, the 101st, and 1st Cav, they were leaving and stuff. So some of the people in their units, we had these little bitty bottles of Tabasco sauce that would come with your MREs. Well, people wanted to take a little bit of Saudi Arabia with them home as a souvenir. So these bottles were probably about an ounce, maybe half an ounce. And what they were doing when they got done with their Tabasco sauce, they would, while they were in the desert, they'd scoop up a little bit of sand and put it in the bottle, and well, they'd ship it home. Guess what? Some of the envelopes or what they were shipping them in would break, and it was jamming up the machines, the postal machines. So we got a directive that came down that said that you cannot ship anything home that's got any sand in it. So when we went through customs, they went through everything, and I mean everything. The dogs were out; they'd walk around your duffel bag, sniff you, of course, and so if you had any kind of like what they would say contraband, you had to dump it. They'd throw it away. So if the dog sat down, you had to go in this room and dump it. Fortunately, nobody in my unit or the unit that I was with, that I served with, they didn't have to do that. But there were people that had to do that, and other things like spent M16 shells. Couldn't take those as a souvenir either. We had to turn those in as well. Army regulation, military regulation, so it's just one of those things that's kind of like, you can't do that stuff. And so, but, there's always somebody that's going to try to sneak it or do something, and then a dog comes and he hits on it, because what some people don't understand is that a dog's sense of smell is so much greater than ours that it's like 10,000 times better than our smell as humans. So they're going to smell just the slightest smell. I mean, even gunpowder, they can smell it. So, and there's a few people that got caught. So the penalty that you have to pay, it's too steep for something so small, But no, so nobody in my unit got it, so that was a good thing. So I guess probably one of the happiest times for a lot of people is that when we got through that, and we're like, yay, okay, yeah, we're closer, we're gonna get on the plane. So I can't really, I think, yeah, we're still in the warehouse. There's an interesting story about that. I'm not really superstitious, but then again, I am a little bit. So while the war was raging on, the air war was raging on, there was another unit behind us that was in the warehouse, and they stayed there for a little bit longer than what we did. And so the air war was going on, and we were making trips back and forth to the warehouse because we had people that were there that couldn't go up to the border at the time, and they had to stay there because I guess they got sick or they got hurt, and they couldn't really do their job up on the border. So we had people back in the rear, and so while we were up there, like I said, the air war was raging and everything, and before we got to the ground phase of the war, they had this unit. They came in. I'm not sure where they were from, but I think it was a reserve unit, maybe from Minnesota or someplace like that. So later found out that one of the guys kind of joked about, what if a Scud hits us or something like that. And I was like, that's something I wouldn't joke about, because you never know. I mean, it could happen. Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately it did. I mean, it just obliterated the warehouse. I mean, it was like a tornado came through. I mean, it just, they shot the Scud and it kind of went off course, and it like ding, hit the warehouse, and this guy, he lost most of his right leg and half of his buttocks in the process. Broke like 3-4 ribs, broke his arm. Later on, I found out that he was like joking about it. And I was like, It's so unfortunate, but that was kind of like my superstition. I I took everything seriously because, it just so much can happen. I mean, just I was superstitious in that regard. That I just didn't want to chance anything. And I remember my aunt. She wrote to me and she told me, she says, "Don't take any unnecessary chances." And I said, "Okay, I'm gonna try to be as safe as possible, and I'm not gonna do that." So, but just me getting sick, that was just the only bump in the road for me, pretty much. Everybody else, I think they came through okay in the unit I served, but there was a few people that got hurt, probably because something they did, not being smart about it, because maybe taking a shortcut or something like that, but that's to be expected. But then a lot of my fellow soldiers were worried about, oh, what kind of award am I going to get? Am I going to get promoted? Am I going to do this? And, awards are nice, and that's good. But my main thing was that from the beginning, before I left the States, I said, I want to come back the way I went over here, which is not in a body bag, not with the toe tag, or the being on a black body bag and my dog tag on the outside and the other one on my toe, and I'm zipped up in it. I didn't want to come back that way. So that was my main objective. I wasn't really concerned about, well, I'm going to get this award because, I mean, if you're killed in action or something like that, KIA, you're not going to see it, So why worry about that? That's something that, it'll come to you in due time. So, actually, there was a person in my unit, but I'm not going to identify him, but this person said, "Hey, I'm so tired of this war, and I miss you and the kids, and blah, 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 and I can't take this, it's too hot, and blah, blah, blah." And we had a satellite phone that the Saudis, that they paid for, basically. You could call anywhere in the world. I mean, it's just like picking up your phone and you calling somebody that lives maybe 2 blocks over from you or maybe out of state. That's how good it was. And I was on my shift, and this person happened to leave this letter, and it was a little bit of clutter. And because the equipment got so hot, because you couldn't leave your water bottle up there because it'd melt, because of the heat and stuff. And so I was on shift, and I was just sitting there monitoring the radio and the satellite phone. And I thought it was just, some orders or something like that, or some papers or something. And I stood up and I looked, and, well, this person was saying that, they were going to try to hurt themselves so they could go home. And I was like, I don't believe this. I cannot believe what I'm reading, what I'm seeing. But I never did share that with anybody, per se, even, people that I was kind of close to while we were over there. I just kind of I couldn't believe it. But war brings out the worst and best in people, and I mean, people do things that you normally wouldn't think they would do, but they do it, for whatever reason, whatever motivation it might be. So, I mean, some of everything. So I just kind of chalked it up, and I said, wow, and never did tell anybody about it, even after I got out. This is probably the first time I spoke about it, but it's like, wow, we've been through the worst of it. Now we're just cleaning the equipment. We're going home. What more do you want? I mean, we can't get home any quicker than what they say that we can leave. But why why do something like that? That's ludicrous. I mean, why would you want to hurt yourself? It's one thing if you're shot by the enemy and you're hurt, or an accident or something like that, or a truck rolls over or something like that, I could see that. But no, just intentionally to try to hurt yourself, I couldn't. I don't couldn't understand it. It just boggled my mind. But it was something I just I thought about it for a while. I was like, wow. I thought about that person's motivation, and I just like, we've gone through the worst of it. We've gone through the sandstorms. We've gone through, the ground war. We've gone through the air campaign. We've, the food, the water, and all that. We've gone through everything, and we're just, we're at the very end, But hey, I understand that person missed his family and his, kids and stuff like that. So I'm not really one to judge or try to be judge, jury, and executioner or anything, but I just, this is something that I just, like, I couldn't believe. I seen it. Not that it was just like, just sitting there just in plain sight. I should have stopped, but I was just like, So I don't know if the person that was writing this wanted somebody to see it. I don't know. But I just moved it away and I put papers over it. And then when this person came back and asked me, when he relieved me, hey, did you see this letter or something like that? And I said, yeah, I just put something over it, but I didn't tell him I read some of the contents of it. Just in plain sight. I just So we got through that phase and got all our equipment clean and got through customs and dogs sniffing us and all that good stuff, and we were cleared, and we were like in as they said, a sterile area. We weren't contaminated or anything. So next thing, we just waited for our flight to come in, or the plane we were going to board. This is the interesting part. So we boarded the plane. It wasn't like Delta or American. I guess there's a lot of airline companies. I don't know if they're still in business or not, but I guess DOD, they contract with so many carriers or whatnot. It was World Airways. I don't know who might be their parent company or something like that, but anyway, really, really large plane, because I remember it was like 3 seats here, 3 seats. I mean, it's just a commercial jet. It's really big. Because we were on the plane with another unit. They were MPs, I think from Virginia or Kentucky or something like that. So we went out to the tarmac and we got loaded and everything, and we loaded the bags on the plane and stuff, and so we took off, and so we're in flight, and I think we stopped. I thought we were going to stop in Spain. I thought, wow, we can go back the same way we went, So midway through the flight, the pilot says we were going to stop in England, and there was like protests like you wouldn't believe. They were like, no, we're not having it. You can't fly here. No. So I think it was England and Ireland. Originally, they said we couldn't go to England because they were pretty well involved in the war. There was a little bit of protest there. And then our secondary place we were supposed to land to get fuel and food too was Ireland. Oh yeah, they were quite angry with us as well. So they said, well, we got to divert to Italy. So we went to an Italian Air Force base, and it was under the cover of darkness. We were there. We were like really, really away from a lot of traffic and stuff, even though it was an Italian Air Force base. So everybody on the plane was asleep. And I remember, we touched down and we taxied and we stopped. And they opened up the door and stuff. And I remember waking up, and there was another person. He woke up and he went back to sleep. But everybody else on the plane was asleep, with the exception of the stewardess and the flight crew and stuff like that. And I woke up, and so I got up, and luckily I had an outside aisle seat, so I was able to get up and kind of stretch my legs. So the stewardess, she asked me, she said, do you want to get a little fresh air? And I said, yeah, why not? This is a long flight. So we were surrounded by the Italian military, and it was dark. You couldn't really see, really far, but you could see the lights off in the distance. But where we were at, there wasn't a whole lot of light, and there was like the Italian police. I can't think of the name, what they call them, but anyway, there was a little bitty car, and he had his little strobe light going, and I was like, yeah, okay. But she told me, she said that they told her that they surrounded our plane, but we couldn't see them. But they were just like in the shadows, in the darkness, just sitting there waiting. And so we were probably there for, I think, about a half an hour, and then we took off. And so we landed in Philadelphia, and there everybody was like, I'm back home. We're in the States. They were happy. And so it was kind of a sigh of relief. And then we flew from there to Wright-Patterson, and then that's where we got off the plane, and they took our bags, and we carried our carry-on bags with us. Went down, got off the plane, and got on the buses, and then we went to Danville the rest of the way. So, and people were lining the streets, and craziness. So, and then my commander from my reserve unit, he came and he picked me up, and I think everybody was like, they were calling their families, oh, come and get me, we're done, and so I guess when I got back, I was just like, wow, this has really been a journey, it's just like all these time zones and sights and smells and nosebleeds and being sick and sandstorms and on and on, and fights.
What was the time frame from when you were called and you had to leave your job and go until you landed back in the States?
The time frame?
Yeah, I mean, how long was the time period?
Oh, okay. It was probably about a good 7 months, almost 8 months. Yeah. It seemed like it was longer. When you go through something like that, time just, it doesn't really stand still. It just kind of like, it just rushes by, just like, the weeks is just like, just almost like warp speed. It just goes by so fast, and you just like, it seemed like I was over there for a year, but it wasn't, But the military, and I'm not just saying just the Army, but they have a really, really good way, accurate way of keeping track of time. It's just like, you were here this day, and yeah, they're really good at keeping track of it. I thought it was longer. It seemed like it was longer. But
so then after that, did you stay in the with your unit, or did you get out, or what?
Actually, I stayed with them. I think I probably had probably about 2 or 3 more years left on my contract, and it was kind of a, not really an odd feeling, but, people kind of looked at you a different way, like, oh, you were in the war, and then it's like, oh, what was it like? And, what did you do? And what happened? And for, you would try to explain the best you can, what was it like, but sometimes it's kind of, really hard to really make them really understand, what you were feeling. And anybody, from my personal experience, and I would say anybody from any war, I don't care if you go way back to the Civil War up to the present day now, anybody that says that they're not afraid, they're not telling the truth. I mean, I was afraid. I'm not going to say I was afraid all the time, but there's just, you had that fear because you don't know. I mean, war is it's chaotic. It's like, I really wouldn't say it's controlled chaos, but it is definitely chaos, and there's a lot, and I mean a lot of stuff that just goes on. I mean, just that you would say, oh, how could that be, or how could that person do that, or how could this person, act this way? Trust me, yeah, people have done it. And I mean, it speaks for itself. I mean, in past wars, when I went to the concentration camp, the museum in southern Germany, of what level would people do to other human beings. I mean, the inhumanity that they don't show the other side. It's just like, oh, I'm gonna kill these people indiscriminately. But I mean, you can't do that. I mean, I think it's if your job as an infantryman, your objective is to kill the enemy, not so much that you want to kill women and children. But then, I guess when we back up a little bit, go to Vietnam, there was things that they've done on our side and on the other side that they've done that, I don't know. It just kind of makes me wonder, why would you want to kill a child, or but then too, when you're fighting somebody in their country, in their backyard, they'll do stuff that we won't do, and it's kind of like, I guess if you're in a fight, I mean, just one-on-one with somebody, you don't know if this person's going to try to gouge your eyes out, or bite you, or and it's kind of like the same thing in war, because you might have the best intentions, maybe not to hurt this person, not to maim them or do anything really, really bad to them, but just kind of like, you want to stand up for yourself and stand up for your rights and not let this person dominate you or anything like that. But this person his motives might be totally, totally way off the charts, that he wants to, annihilate you and do this. And I think the same thing goes for war, is that, when we're engaged in, hostilities, then the other side is going to do stuff to probably try to make us look like, oh, we're monsters, or we're the worst. And I don't feel that that's true. I mean, for our armed forces, I don't believe that, but things do happen, and but like I said, stuff, it's not, it's really chaotic. It really is. And
Did you bring anything to show today?
Actually, all my ribbons, it's probably easy for me to bring those, because my medals, they didn't really give me all my medals, so they're more quick to give you your ribbons than they are your medals. So, oops, really like this. And well, this is something that I guess my girlfriend at the time, she wore, and she gave it to me.
And what does it say?
It says Operation Desert Storm, until they all come home. Specialist Daryl Chavours, 116, 1991. One of my loose ribbons. This is my marksmanship badge. I wasn't a great shot, but I guess as long as you can. And this is my driver's and mechanic's badge. Usually this is awarded to if you drive so many miles without an accident.
Can you hold it up just a little longer? Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
So,
And yeah.
and these are all the ribbons, but I'll put the pictures in here. I had to kind of not bring some photos because it had other people in it and probably get pretty upset. This picture is a village that we're passing by. It's on Tapline Road. It's a main road leading to our to where we were out in the desert at. This is kind of like my living quarters, basically, where we slept on cots, and at one point we had a rainstorm and everything got flooded. People say it don't rain in the desert, but that's not true either, because it rained so much that we had to dig trenches around the tent because the water was like rushing through that, you know. So we were outside feverishly making a trench, and then the crazy thing about it is about 2 hours later, everything dried up. It's like a sponge. It just soaked everything up, and it's like, oh, we didn't have any rain. So, so much for that. And this is the tent where I worked out of long days and nights, you know, when the ground war, air war was going on. That's where I stepped out and looked and seen that couldn't see anything. Good thing I didn't walk too far, otherwise I probably would have twisted my ankle or broke it. This is kind of like the aftermath of the warehouse that got hit by the Scud with the guy I told you the story. This is a picture of a wheel off of one of the vehicles. Our higher staff, they were coming back, and they had to get off the road for some reason, and a landmine hit it, and it basically destroyed the truck, and this is the only thing that was left of it. And so they brought it back to emphasize the point: stay on the road, don't venture off, because this could be the end result. The people that I told you about that wandered the desert, well, actually I was able to get a picture of one, that Bedouin, nomads of the desert.
Can you tilt it like, yeah, there you go, because of the, forward
sorry.
just a little bit, there, like that, perfect.
Okay. He was passing through with his herd of camels, and, you know, he came and talked to us and stuff, and, you know, didn't really speak English, kind of talked a little bit, but, you know, I guess we kind of figured it out a little bit, so. And I told you about the rainstorm. Well, here's proof. I was kind of taking a break from digging the trenches and whatnot, and yeah, so a couple hours later, everything's dry, and this is like kind of not really immediate, but just maybe a day or two after they're trying to clean up the warehouse. There was like a little building on the side that didn't get the brunt of it. Well, you can barely see me in this picture, probably this next one too, but it's a communication cable or something that we were running, and I just kind of stood outside the tent. And, excuse me. So, I know you're kind of wondering, how's the bathrooms and how do we dispose of our waste? Well, here it is. So these are burn barrels, basically, and we had Actually, they were enclosed. They had like screen door screen on them, and you had three, I think, no, four toilets in them, and kind of like it was boxed in with the door screen basically. And so in the back, there's like a door in the back of it, and we would pull these 55-gallon drums that were cut down. We'd pull them out, and I don't know, I don't think you can see a flame in them, so we had to burn our waste basically. We would use diesel fuel because the smell very, very low. You'd think that you'd smell what you'd smell, but no. It was really thick black smoke. You could see it for quite some distance, maybe not miles on end, but a fair distance. And so that's how we disposed of stuff. And they would dig a pit. I think we had like a backhoe of some sort, and they'd come and they'd dig it out, and we'd have to burn this down to a point, you'd just burn it, and everybody would take turns. So, if it was your turn, that's what you had to do. So I'm not sure if that's something you were wondering about, but hopefully that answers the question, because I know some people probably wonder, hey,
Sure.
You're out in the desert, where's the bathrooms at? But yeah, we improvised, and we had like a soakage pit for the urine. Hopefully I can say that, but it was basically consisted of rocks. We'd dig a hole, put a bunch of rocks in it, and so the liquid part, it'd go there, and then when it get kind of full, we'd set it on fire with diesel fuel to cut down on the germs, and that's why we used diesel fuel to not spread anything. So it was kind of safe to do that. And then same thing with our garbage. We had to burn our garbage too as well. We had like a burn pit. I'm sure you heard about those. Some people getting sick from the burn pits and stuff. So that's what we do. We'd have to burn our waste and our garbage as well, because like here, you have somebody come by and pick your garbage up, but out there, it's like, oh, okay, what are we going to do? So being sanitary is really, really important. This is you can't really see it, but it's kind of like the start of a dust storm.
Sure.
It kind of rolled through. I was like, hey, let me try to capture this. And then this is like a display. We went to this museum during our off time. It's called Aramco. It's Saudi Arabia oil company or something like that. And they had a display. They showed you all the stuff that comes from oil, the products and whatnot. It was a pretty interesting museum and stuff. And this is from one of my trips in town. A couple Saudi teenagers, their dad owned the shop. Don't really know their name. They didn't really speak English, but they tried to. And somebody said, "Hey, why don't you pose with them?" And I was like, "I don't know. Okay, I'll do it." So, but they're pretty friendly guys. They were brothers. They worked in the shop, and this is where I told you about them wearing like sandals and stuff. Well, their feet would get dirty. This is the bathroom, and they would sit and they'd wash their feet and stuff. And this is it's like a mile marker. This is the pipeline in Saudi Arabia. It's like almost, well, they didn't really have guardrails on the road. This is probably like you see mile markers on the interstate. This is like mile marker 214. So it's on It's on the pipe. It's quite big. I mean, really, really, really big. I think it runs for like 300 or 400 miles. Another picture of the museum. Just a few products there. And this is kind of like before sandstorm hits, kind of like one of those little side angles. I was like, okay, let's see, before and after. And this is the little building that it kind of survived. This
Bring it down just, that, and over that way, just a little, there you go.
It survived the Scud hit from the Scud missile that went astray. I don't know if it was intentional when it did hit. And actually, I guess when I was in the shop, I don't know, it was just something, brought a flag.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
well, thank you again for agreeing to come and talk to us and share your experiences. Really appreciate it, and thanks for bringing visual aids. That's always fun to see those too. So, and I do truly want to thank you for your service to our
you're
country.
welcome.